Pash Chash Eskol. It is good we are together. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples, who have reserved treaty rights to this land, including the Duwamish, Duh Duabj, Suquamish tribe, Duh Akwabj, Muckleshoot Indian tribe, Buckleshoot, and Snoqualmie Indian tribe, Stokwabuh. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. And we thank you for taking the time to know and understand the true history of this place, and to practice allyship in taking care of these shared lands. In good health. Hoi.
Tonight is part of our cINeDIGENOUS programming at SIFF. The theme is Roots and Ancestors, and we're really excited to share this time and space with Emily Cohen Ibañez, the Director of Fruits and Labor, and Christopher Kahunahana, the Director of WAIKIKI. And we're interested in diving into a discussion about their narratives, which have provided a counterbalance to preventing stereotypes and presumptions of the communities that they are part of, in addition to just honoring and welcoming the grace of ancestors as they present themselves in our stories. So with that, I would like to first invite you, Emily, to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Emily Cohen Ibañez. Thank you, Tracy. I'm really excited to be a part of this and to be in conversation with you and Christopher. I watched Christopher's film last night, Waikiki, and it's just amazing narrative film. And I come to you from Oakland, which is Ohlone territory.
Thank you. And Christopher.
Hello, I'm Christopher Kahunahana, writer, director of Waikiki. I'm Kanaka Maoli and coming to you from Oahu in Hawaii.
Great. Well, let's just dive in. I love that you both took time to watch each other's films. And I would love for first, if you can each just describe your projects and then ask each other the first question that you may have had from one another's films. Emily, if you could describe your film first.
Yeah, so my film is called Fruits of Labor. It's a featured documentary. It's a lyrical coming of age story about a young woman of color, Ashley Solis, and she divides her time between working in the strawberry fields and going to school and doing a night shift at a food processing plant. But the film really looks at the complex world of this very layered young woman as she comes of age in the last year of high school. And as Tracy was talking about, both of our films have aspects of ancestral, for Ashley, the spiritual world is inhabited in nature, which provides a really stark contrast to the kind of more mechanical form of labor, industrial agriculture. So yeah, and so in terms of that relationship to land and nature and growing food.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you, Emily. And Christopher, could you share with us the story of your film?
Waikiki's a contemporary story about the struggles to live in current day Hawaii, which has the highest cost of living in the United States and the highest rate of homelessness. And the story is about displacement and disconnection from the land and our ancestors. As Hawaiians, we aren't from the land, we are part of the land, we're of the land. And so that disconnection creates a lot of the issues that we have within our communities, such as spousal abuse, addiction. And so in the story, we're dealing with some of the things that we see in our everyday life here. And her goal is to just have a place where she feels safe, and that requires her to go on a journey to connect back to the land and her ancestors.
Thank you, Christopher. For you, Emily, what stood out to you about Christopher's film?
Well, what I really loved was sort of the complex sort of psychology, I guess, for lack of a better word. So we were presented with Waikiki and this sort of the commodity sense of, as a tourist, right? What you would see is like a representation of Hawaii with the hula dancers. And then quickly you go behind the scenes and suddenly you see the life of this woman who is the performer, and get another take of what is sort of the reality and complexity of being, living in Waikiki and being a native Hawaiian woman. And so I just really loved that sort of like, what is the kind of the image on the surface, or kind of superficial kind of images that we live behind, and then all that complexity and what happens in life. And I just loved sort of this ghost kind of aspect, the character of the homeless man, Woe, who becomes her friend and is, and yeah, I just found, and then sort of how you played, I thought you played with the medium in such a way to show this kind of, I don't know if it's a certain sense of disintegration of that initial image of like the smiling woman, with doing the hula dance. And through that, she becomes like more deeply connected to, exploring the traumatic memory, but also the teachings of her grandmother, for example, as you kind of flash back to this ocean, her grandma and her in the ocean, and by the end she's doing, I don't know if it's a kind of ceremony, but there, it's just interesting as that image disintegrates along with her as her economic stability and perhaps her psyche in some ways. There's also this other aspect of herself that she can step into in a way. So I just found it fascinating, and I loved all the layers. I loved how you did this visually. I think that's a challenge, to enter someone's internal world and internal drama and be able to put it in the visual medium. So that's what I really loved about it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, she actually knows the film better than me.
I know, it was a pretty awesome recap.
She really got the film. I'm like, hey, all right.
Perfect.
We're done here.
Sorry.
Emily, I love your film. It was a piece of life that we never really get to see. It's like those people, those migrant workers, and the people who, grow our food, and their connection to the land in those areas. And I thought it was beautiful how the story was really about the young woman and her being a teenager with these societal pressures on her that, normal, I'd say not normal, but American teenagers don't necessarily have to deal with, like being the sole breadwinner in her family, and the stress of having her mom, losing her mom. And those things it was touching and powerful. And I think the reason it felt so moving was because you gave us time to really get to know her as a normal teenager. And it wasn't just like based on the traumas that would happen and the struggle. It was like she also, had aspirations to go to prom. And I thought that was beautiful. So it felt like a teen movie, like a, but at the same time, like based in reality. And that's interesting that you said it was a documentary, because I didn't really realize. I think it walks a fine line between documentary and fictional narrative, because some parts, I didn't know it was a documentary. But it felt very real. Like it felt like it could be a documentary. And I thought that was very uh, that was interesting choice, directorial choice, to play it so that we didn't get the sense of whether it was real or not. And it's great to hear that it is. I mean, I know a lot of the scenes took place in reality. Like, for instance, you shot it at an actual graduation, which I thought was, just great storytelling. And I did really love the aspects of your film. And I had mentioned it before we got on, but you did these scenes of flowers blooming and a butterfly coming in a chrysalis and then becoming a butterfly. And that was powerful, I think, because it told a lot of the main character's journey, but in a way that was more poetic. And I appreciate that about your film. And I felt it was just interesting to get so close to those characters. And I was wondering if, what are your connection to those people? Like, is that an experience you've had, or did you meet these people through working with them in that, say, the garden, for instance? But I thought that was like, it was real,
That
Oh, well,
connection feels very real.
thank you. See, we both did. It's fun, right? Recapping each other's films. It's really cool. And it's cool to listen to. I was enjoying it. I'm like, right on. But yeah, and I'm glad it felt that you could feel that kind of hybrid element, because it sort of mixes, what we call verite, but with, I was committed to like collaborating very closely with Ashley, and I didn't have any qualms about, even after filming in a more, let's say, observational style, to then be able to stage certain things and having the family really involved in we're all kind of in on the storytelling together. And I think that probably happens with all documentaries, but maybe this was just very, I kind of embraced that maybe more explicitly. So yeah, as far as the relationship, so I met Ashley, you're right, through that garden. So my sister heads this nonprofit that was working with Ashley's community around that garden, and so I had did a collaborative video collective with my college students. I was teaching at a university at the time, and the youth that, and Ashley was one of these youth, and she just really stood out. And so I developed a relationship with her over time and her family. So, and we continue to have a pretty strong relationship. And, our moms have met each other. Now they're going to meet in person. My mom's coming to visit. So we're going to do a big lunch. And my sister is very involved, like call her Tia Rose and stuff. So it's like our families are, we kind of went through a lot of things together because, just personal life, the way life is, you go through hardships and things like that on, whatever it was happening in my life. It's like Ashley was a part of that too, in a way. So we've gotten really close. In terms of my experience, so I come from an immigrant family, and I was raised by a single mom. My dad died when I was young, but I was never a farm worker. I always identified in the terms of, I grew up in Arizona feeling often actually very alienated, um, because I mainly grew up, it was very like white. And so there was a lot of discrimination against my family and myself, and just feeling that alienation. And I think for Ashley, it's different. But there was a certain connection there of like identifying with, in some ways, just a teenager who's has a certain loneliness, and I think we kind of connected on that, and I really just wanted to see her come into her own, and I think there was identification there. So there's overlap in our experience, and then there's things that are different, like I never had to sustain my family, which is big.
I see from our audience, there's a question. Where did Beatrice come to America from?
Oh, from Mexico.
Great. There's also another comment here about Ashley. How did that process occur working with Ashley?
So, like I said, we had met, and through me wanting to do this video collective, it was an experiment in filmmaking. And Ashley's just a very curious, she was much like myself when she was 15. She's very, very shy, but is very observant. So I saw she had this eye, very intelligent young woman, um, sensitive towards her community, and curious, asking questions. She was interested in the camera. I thought, oh my God, she picked it up. Not, my college students were great, but like she was really picked it up quickly. So I noticed that, and I can't remember the question now, but that's how you just sort of, I think sometimes, I don't know if other filmmakers feel this way. You're just two people are drawn together, or a family, or there's different ways you can go topically towards something and then cast for it. But this wasn't that. This was something that a relationship developed. And um, one of the things that inspired it too was after Trump's election, with increased ICE raids. That's when all the young people I was working with started working in the fields, replacing undocumented adults. So Ashley being one of those people, this was first going to be a radio piece, because I'm like, I can't raise the money to do it. And then, it's short film, which it did have a short film thing on the Guardian. And then it was like, this is so rich. And so I, dove into the feature, and Ashley was willing to dive in too, and had the courage to let me follow her around and get involved. So that's sort of how that happened.
It's such a beautiful collaboration, and it's one of the reasons why I thought it would be great to pair you two together tonight, because as I understand, Christopher, you involved community in your film as well, making sure that there is community voice in how you told your story.
Yeah, I mean, the story came about from the community, so it kind of grew organically from the people that I was was surrounded by, and so that was organic and natural. In terms of involving the community, I mean, this film Wiki couldn't have happened without the support of the community. It's like from the top to the bottom, a lot of our needs for production were facilitated by our relationships with the people in the community, from the film community, or the Hawaiian community, or the arts community in Chinatown. Yeah, I think everyone knows that it takes a village to make a film, and it couldn't be more true. And it's just such a huge undertaking to aspire to even want to make something on that level. And I think I'm just grateful and feel like I've had the privilege of making a film and being able to represent a part of my community in the process.
For your lead actress, this was her first film project, is that right?
I apologize. So this is how I've been inspired by the film. It's like I'd be working on the film in this environment, and we'd constantly hear planes going by. It's like and that's a lot of the pressures of living in a society that's so crowded. It's so crowded. It's like we don't ever get a chance to escape constant bombardment by either the sounds of construction or the military, or flights in and out of Honolulu constantly. But the question was, I apologize. The question was Danielle. Yeah. So the actress, she's amazing, and I met her through when I first wrote the story. I knew I wouldn't have a movie unless I found an actress, and without her, there was like there's no sense in even trying to do anything else, trying to find a crew or funding or the rest of the cast. And so I started with her, and I had gone through the normal agencies, casting agencies and such. And everyone just didn't quite fit the bill for me. A little maybe too polished in a lot of ways, they're more commercial. And so I decided to start looking within the community in the local theater companies. And so I went and started seeing as many plays as I could. And I found her in it's an old theater and it's a reputable theater, but a theater company is called Kumukuhua. And I think it's about a 20-person theater. And I saw a production that she was in, and instantly I thought there was something about her that I should follow up on. And it was kind of fortuitous, but someone had also told me about this actress that they had seen in a different play, and it just so happened to be the same actress. So I reached out to her. She thought it was weird, she thought like, why is this guy following me after the play? And I said, hey, I just would love to meet you for coffee. And in the process, I think she kind of got what I was trying to do. She knew it was something that really hadn't been done before from Hawaii, being a Kanaka Maoli and trying to direct a feature film. It's not like something we are used to here. We don't have a culture of funding. We have amazing, talented filmmakers, but it's the feature film barrier has been, it's really hard to do. So I think for her, it was surprising to hear that we were working on something on this scale. But I was lucky. She was amazing. After I'd cast her in that feature, we shot it in about 2018. During that time period, she went on to star in or be featured in, I'd say, 10 other short projects since then. And I think it was indicative of how necessary an actress like herself was. So she was missing from all those projects until she just magically appeared. And I feel blessed to have worked with her.
Yeah, she has delivered such a powerful performance. And I'm curious, there's all these dimensions of psychology and surrealism and culture. Did she help you to interpret that as part of her role, or was that your directing? And I'm just curious what that was like.
Well, it's interesting because the screenplay I had written and I cast her to be featured in wasn't the movie that we ended up shooting. It changed, it constantly changed, and I think it changed all the way till the last edit. It's like it kept getting refined, and we'd find new things about what we had shot that we thought would work better. And I think this film absolutely was created in post-production, and so not on set. She didn't, we didn't interact that way in terms of the creation of the character for, the psychology of the character. But I was inspired by her performance and found aspects of different takes that would lend itself to be used in the way that it eventually was used. It wasn't necessarily, we didn't set out to shoot that film, I mean, there's aspects for sure, like her breakdowns, her journeys within herself, those things existed, but they became more real as we look through the footage that we were able to get on set.
As they say, films are often edited 3 to 5 times over, from the writing to the filming to production.
Absolutely. And Black Horse can attest. This film, he's seen so many different cuts. It's been a journey.
So there's a comment here from Jean, who's in the audience, and it's for you, Christopher. They say, we've been to Honolulu many times over, not so much as tourists, but mostly for work and to visit friends and family. So while we found almost every location identifiable and familiar in your film, each was depicted from such a distinctly different viewpoint than our own. The film left us feeling somewhat disoriented, and that actually seemed to entirely fit the film's subjects of economic fragility, exploitation, cultural dislocation, psychological fragmentation. There's- That's the end of their comment.
Well, yeah, it was difficult while we were shooting the film. Hawaii is very beautiful. I mean, it was really hard for us to actually capture it in a way that it felt not picturesque. I mean, we'd have to it with right outside the frame would be a rainbow, like constant. So we'd have to like, okay, all right, we have to move a little bit, or we have to wait because the lighting was too beautiful. We're like, it's not a romance scene, but it just feels that way. But so yeah, we did purposefully try to uh, show Hawaii in a different lens, you know.
Yeah, I think that fragmentation, it's kind of how we've talked about these systems were not necessarily built for people like us, here in this conversation, and that we need to build new systems. And sometimes that's about kind of breaking down barriers, breaking down perceptions, just that breaking apart of the old to release that energy and that space for the new. And I appreciate that about that comment, that they realized that they held a certain perception from their point of view, but you helped them to shift their gaze. That's beautiful. Similar to what Christopher mentioned, Emily, there's a comment here for you. I honestly wasn't sure until the end whether I was watching a documentary or a feature narrative. Um, It makes me think about your scenes depicting ancestors, as well as the lyrical nature of your story, and how that begins to create this hybrid experience of recalling, ancestral memory, as well as just the emotional life or inner journey of a young woman.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, no, that was no super interesting comment. And it definitely very kind of intentional from the outset in terms of um I know that for which is fine. I mean, I love a wide breadth of documentary approaches, but I know with also who I am as a filmmaker and how I want to be in the world, that actively sort of being, actively telling the story was really important. Some folks might feel like, well, that's um, somehow betrays the truth. And from the way I see it, it's a way to portray a deeper truth. And that perhaps, I think that there are distinctions between doing a narrative fiction film and a documentary and the ways that we work, but there's also a lot of overlap. And it's always a representation of reality, and you're always amplifying a certain aspect of life. Like I would always tell Ashley that, like, we're amplifying this aspect. Like, there's other ways to look or point the camera or whatever, but then we're going to be giving a ton of attention to that, so it'd be interesting conversations around that. And I love having those conversations. I just find it, I mean, part of it's just the joy of making the film and the process. I find it fascinating. So it's also just like, for me, joyful. And I think that this film, before then, am also trained as an anthropologist, and I'd done a lot of work in war situations, actually mainly with men. And so this was like a real break for me. So I think I was very intentional that this had to be a joyful experience for everyone involved, even if it's hard work, and even if sometimes it's difficult, even emotionally, like we're tackling some hard issues. So that kind of joy and being able to create and dream and reimagine, you know, the world. So even if you're seeing this like sort of very often oppressive, you know, global food system, that there could be another way of imagining it. And communities are constantly doing that, and people are constantly navigating to, you know, make meaning in their life, and we all do that, you know. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. It's There's not as much, I guess, disintegration in fruits of labor, but there was very much intentional work towards kind of a reimagining and creating sort of spaces of joy within the process itself.
Um, how have the political implications been part of your filmmaking and then also the distribution? I imagine there were many considerations. As Christopher said, there is a definite sense of um, the impending deportation
Hmm.
of Ashley's mom, for example, and
Yeah.
just how did you navigate all of those nuances as well?
So that was something I was very concerned about, to be honest, from the very beginning, because if there was any, especially as a result of the film, um, you know, if Ashley's mom was being put at further risk, I take that very seriously. So there was a lot of discussions with her mom where I was like, this is a potential risk. Like, on one hand, people say, you know, amplifying it in this empathetic way in the story is a layer of protection, but not necessarily, and especially during, you know, a moment in which our world has become increasingly aggressive and demonizing immigrants. So I was, oh, and I'm still concerned about it, to be honest. So I was working with a lawyer who donated her time to support the family and to support the film. So she's an immigration lawyer, and you know, I'm very grateful to Tanya for that. I consulted with other filmmakers, and still do, who've worked with anyone in their films that are undocumented. So yeah, it's like I don't think it ever ends. Like, I feel like it's a continual concern. What I try to do was switch around sort of, so in terms of disorientation, but you wouldn't feel it in the film, but I switch out exteriors, don't necessarily correlate to the interiors. So that was a way to not make locations obvious, you know. So different things like that, that I did to make Beatrice's location not decipherable. But there is always a risk, and it's something I'm always aware of. It's true.
Thank you. Yeah, the activism inherent in your story and that relationship to capitalism and economy and the land. Also, I see those themes in Waikiki, Christopher, that there's this separation happening that is absolutely driven by capitalism. And I'm curious if you inherently have, you know, wove that storyline into Waikiki and the experiences of your main character. Because I imagine just, oof, it's just glaring, the wealth and the separation of resources there.
Yeah, you know, the story had started off, I think, a little bit smaller in scope. Like, we had originally, it started as a screenplay called Karaoke Kings, and I was more focused on the Amy character and her relationship to Kea and Woe. Um, but as we, it was that project kind of got stuck in development hell. So we decided to cherry pick some of the characters and scenes, and I put them like a week before. Say, where were they the week before Karaoke King started? And in the process of doing that, I think it allowed me to be freer in discussing some of the bigger issues surrounding the characters. So it wasn't so focused on the relationships in the film. It became, bigger in that we could discuss some of the social aspects that surrounded the character. And those are just prevalent here. I mean, it's like everybody I know works multiple jobs just to get by. I mean, I think, well, this is a fact, but our median home price here is $950,000 currently. So it's like, in order just to survive, none of us even aspire to own property here. Unfortunately, Hawaii, there's a global demand for paradise. So the richest of the richest can all afford to live here. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has property, Larry Ellison. They just buy islands, and that's never going to change. So, I mean, it's because it's an island, and it's islands. I kind of felt that it was necessary for me to say, hey, is this the right use of our resources? It's like, is allowing 30,000 people a day to come to Hawaii, 10 million people a year come to Hawaii when we have about 1.2 million residents, is this sustainable? And it was interesting. So when I started making Waikiki versus Karaoke Kings, there were some people who questioned whether that was wise. It's like a lot of our funding comes through the, tourism, tourist industry, visitor industry. And it was kind of fortunate. We were fortunate. It wasn't something we had planned on doing, but I think the timing of it coming out during and after a global pandemic, when all of a sudden Waikiki was completely empty. So no one was on the street. The fishes came back. People got to experience Waikiki like they've never experienced it in our lifetime. Like it just felt like it was the paradise that people really wanted to, who were coming here really wanted. And so I think it gave the people in Hawaii the opportunity to see Waikiki for the film for what it commented on, without it, that initial shock, like, hey, we all worked in the tourism industry. Myself, I've been a bartender, a valet, a busboy. That's how, I went to school. I mean, we all do it here. So, Hawaii, the good jobs, like the best job you can get is a construction worker. It's consistent work. They never stop building here. It's like there's a joke within our community that the state bird's the crane, the construction crane, because it's like they're just everywhere. It's like you can go look at the skyline and all you see is cranes. So for us, that became more about what the movie was versus just being the backdrop to the character story. Well, I think we kind of tried to immerse the two. So it's like the rape of our resources and land kind of contributes to her demise. It's like the psychology of this constant bombardment of sound, and kind of adds to her psychological issues.
She's not separate from the land, but when
No.
separated, she feels that.
Right.
Yeah, I heard a statistic once, and correct me if it's wrong, but that the majority of the unhoused people in Hawaii are
Oh, yeah.
Maoli, Micronesian, indigenous peoples.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely true. It's like I think, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but at any one time, a majority of the people who live on the street, who are houseless, are Polynesian or Micronesian, from Oceania. A lot of them are Kanaka Maoli, which is sad. So, I mean, we see it in everything. So it's like this, as a filmmaker and an artist, you're basically speaking to the things that cause these hurts in you. I think that's where your strength comes from, and that's when you can be the most authentic. And during this the process of shooting this film, I took a break and I went away from the project because I went and volunteered to protect the Mauna. And that was like a real life example of it happening. University of Hawaii pays $1 a year for the mountain. So we're talking about since the beginning, they paid $48 for the lease of the mountain. And this is at the same time that the state keeps saying, oh yes, you can just and continue leasing the land for 99 years at $1 a year. So is all the military properties in Hawaii. They all get it for $1. And then at the same time, they never have money to build homes for Hawaiians on Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Like they never have, people die on the list constantly. So the list is 40,000 people long, and generations of people have been on the list and they die on the list, waiting for them to have enough resources to build the homes which they were required to under the state, under the agreement when they, chose to take all our land in trust, right? So it's that was, for me, being on the Mauna, it was real, it was tangible. It's like, this is colonization happening currently. This is not something that happened in the past. This is them saying, we're going to build whatever we want, whether you like it or not. And they were willing to arrest our kupuna, arrest our elders. It was horrible to witness our respected elders in our community being arrested. And it also gave me the confidence to say, hey, we have to say what we have to say, because if we don't, they're going to continue to do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just, where are the ethics when the peoples who've traditionally cared for the lands since time immemorial are experiencing displacement and carrying those wounds for society and not being cared for? It just breaks my heart to hear about those elders and other people who are waiting for housing. And I think about, again, just the systems in place that are in place for a reason, and they're working as they were designed. And I think about that scene where Kea had saved up her money, and because she didn't have credit, she's trying her hardest to be in the system, to play by the system. And even at that point,
That's true. Yeah, it's really hard. I've had friends who are, moving or looking for places currently, and it's everyone's moving here right now. Everyone's escaping the continental US, and they're moving here. They're just snatching property up left and right. I mean, it's a real estate boom. And to find even a rental property here it's you can get actually commercial rental because everyone's business is closed. There's no industry, but to find a residential property to rent, it's nearly impossible. Yeah.
Before asking Emily another question, there is a question for you here, Christopher, from Ray in the audience. Ray says, when I watched your movie, I saw the ending as tragic. Kea's psychotic break and ruination. What didn't occur to me until Emily recapped your movie, though, is that she has to reconnect with her ancestors to recover her life. Was that maybe its hopeful ending? The dance she does, maybe it's her remembering who she is, or a way to find her way back. Did you intend for the ending to be hopeful?
Yes and no. Yes, that in order for us to work through and process intergenerational trauma, we have to reconnect to our kupuna, our elders. And our kupuna is also nature. Nature is our kupuna. It's our elders. Like we consider, the mountains and the ocean and the skies as part of us, the Aina. It's like that is us. And so in order for her to move forward through her current situation, she had to go backwards and reconnect with her grandmother in the movie. But yes, it is sad. It was meant to be both, it's like, it's bittersweet. It's like, so she had to get, go through have these psychic breaks and episodes in order for her to eventually get to a place where that was the only option for her. She couldn't, continue on until she was able to reconnect. And yeah, it is tragic. It's like it's tragic. But I hopeful.
Hopeful. So both.
Both, yeah, absolutely. It was more. We had different ending before, and it was more tragic. So that was the compromise. We're like, we have to give some glimmer of hope. I think that was Black Horse. You gotta let the light in, just a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, I know from him.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's another thematic that I see in both of your films is the intergenerational component, and just seeing, how Ashley radiates and talking about, her family and thinking about her grandmother and her culture and how that's there, right? That's that spirit, maybe that, as you say, that kapuna, that energy that can carry us forward through those times. And it seems like Ashley has that in Aces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important because, so many people that are doing, like we talk about essential labor now, but people are made invisible, especially women workers. And what's interesting, I was looking at some recent statistics, and actually, whereas before, generally men made up a bigger part of the workforce, things have really flipped with the pandemic because women do so much of the essential labor. And so, when work is devalued and denigrated, work that actually does require, people call it unskilled labor, it's not unskilled. Like if you're in the fields with Ashley, oh my God, we had to ask her, talk about staging, we had to ask her to slow down because we couldn't capture it. It takes incredible skill to pick the strawberries in that way and not get the wrong ones, and to weed it in the right way. And they go so fast because they're paid by the box, and so it's very skilled labor, but also there's knowledge there, and that isn't given recognition, and that for one to move forward in the world and to come into your own and embrace your power, you have to, Ashley knows this, right? Reclaim the power of your cultural heritage. And so this sort of a different way of understanding nature, of valuing, of having wonder in the world. If you lose that, I don't know how you can get up in the morning, and so I definitely, that sort of ancestral, and we all have, to me, that is a human condition. Maybe I'm universalizing too much here, but I think even as an artist or filmmaker, whatever, I always, I have like my ancestors when I'm thinking in film and in the world. To exist in the world, you're always, I think, standing on the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of our grandmothers, and of that kind of, all this kind of knowledge that many of us, one has, that isn't always given the value. So oftentimes, people will see farm workers, it's like a social issue, but not really want to take the time to, like, who is this person, and who is this person who's a very full and rich person, and layered and complex. And so I think that Ashley absolutely has a great pride, and embraces that knowledge and is curious about that. And I think that energizes her and is what drives, in many ways, to me, I think, the story. Um, uh, so no, I absolutely, and I love that in Waikiki, and sort of that recognition of the different layers of what we consider like history or memory or and how that all comes together in one's life, and I hope that a lot of people can identify with that, whatever your cultural heritage is, because we don't just we're all people with histories, and our histories go beyond that, actual, body that we come into. It's we're bringing forward everything, our histories and what we know. So yeah, I mean, I think that's so important. And what my hope is by doing that, I don't know, maybe my film is just, it's like a water dropping on a stone, but I feel like the hope is that maybe we can rethink and value, come to value and reimagine what work is, in this country, and essential work, and what growing our food is. I mean, we all need to eat, so I just, for me, that kind of, and there's so much knowledge that if we ignore that ancestral knowledge, uh, we're ready. We're like on this, we know with all the environmental crisis that we're in today, we're just deep diving into an abyss, and yet we have all this rich knowledge to pull from to get us out of the mess we made. So, yeah, definitely, I have a lot of interest in that, and love thinking about, um, really drawn to thinking about what it is to be a person in this sort of larger sense. And so, yeah, that's what I appreciated with Christopher's film. And I think, Tracy, I know that, that's kind of a part of the work that you do too. And I think that's a real connection that we have.
Mhm. We're all intricately connected, and by honoring our ancestors, past, present, future, seen and unseen, we're really walking their legacies and thinking, well of and planting seeds for our future generations.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I see, our films maybe are seeds that we're planting for a kind of revolution. That's my hope.
Yeah.
There's days where I'm like, just burn the shit down, or burn it down. You know what I mean? But like, it's also, then there's like, how can we reimagine the world? And
Well, film is, it gives me the hope to do something that's productive instead of just burning it down, because that's where it comes from, right? You like have all these, you have to direct it somewhere, and I hope that your film and my film would inspire people to look deeper into the issues that we discussed, but also to inspire filmmakers to within my community to tell the stories that affect our communities, and be hopeful that with the opportunities such as Seattle International Film Festival and this conversation, other people will get to learn some of the things we hope to share that we find valuable about our culture and our communities.
Yeah. I'm curious. Oh, sorry. Can I ask Christopher a question?
Sure. We have I don't know if we're allowed to go over, honestly. But
it's time. Okay, good.
Yeah,
yes.
I would say go for it. Ask
no, I thought we had a whole other hour. Even I ordered, okay, look at me. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going until 8:30. And I even ordered food. It's so funny. Anyway.
Wait, let me double check. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would be funny. And you have food on the way? Oh.
Yeah, but don't worry about it. It's coming at 8.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. Ask that question.
Okay. Yes. And no, so I'm just curious. Okay, so I'm starting to want to write as well. Like actually thinking like narrative fiction, and maybe still incorporating documentary, but maybe going and pushing that further for myself. And I was just curious, how did you come into being, maybe you went to film school, I don't know what your trajectory was, but just how did you get into writing and directing fiction?
You know, I I started off as a photographer. So, well, drawing, pencil drawing, painting, and then photography. And then from photography, I went into time lapse photography, which is motion picture, 16 millimeter, shoot a lot of time lapse films. And I actually didn't learn to write until I started wanting to tell stories with the ability with images. And, you know, I just realized there was a, there weren't stories that were from my perspective. And so I just had to write them myself. I was like, well, you know, I tried to find something that I could shoot, but there was nothing that I could shoot. So I'm like, I guess I got to write it. And it's kind of was out of necessity as a young filmmaker. You just learn to write. Writing, I write more now than I do any other aspect of the filmmaking process. Like I'm always writing. I write every day. It's kind of, it's the way I process everything. It's like I just write it down, write it down, write it down, and eventually I just look through all these notes and try and piece together segments that I think would be an interesting story. But I just everything, I think everything's in play when you become a writer. It's like every conversation you have, every interaction you have, you kind of just jot it down like, wait, that was interesting, I'll just put it down. So if anyone appears in my films, I apologize. But and thank you. Like, you know, honestly, like the female character, the female lead, the male leads, they're, you know, they are all people from my life. You know, it's like they're amalgamations of different people. You know, I think I was that construction worker, and you know, I was, you know, those are my girlfriends, those are my sisters, those are my mothers. You know, it's like you kind of just combined a lot of different relationships into creating characters, you know.
No, it's very cool. Just
Writing's fun, you know.
Yeah, no, I love to write, and I used to do more academic writing because, you know, I was in academia. And then I do write for what I do, but I want to like more get into writing scripts and seeing how that goes. But that's interesting. I like hearing about your process and how you.
Yeah, you know, I try to have writing partners, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard because, you know, it's like, well, I'm not organized that way. It's like I don't, nothing's finished. Like it's just a continual work in progress. So I'll work my way through, just keep working through it. And it seems like writing partners get frustrated with my process. So they keep correcting things like immediately. And I think I kind of want to work big and then get more defined, you know, so that you can keep moving. But I think the problem with writing stories is that you get stuck trying to make it perfect on the paper. And I think you should just really, for me personally, I try to sketch as much as possible all the way through, and then go back and fix it. But I think professionally, everyone says that's not the way to do it, but that's the only way I could do it, or else I get stuck on page one. And like I end up with a perfect page one, and that's it. Like, I'll give up. I'll get frustrated, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
What so both of you, I feel like there's a lot of creativity happening, and I'm curious what you each have going on or what your thoughts are for your next projects.
What are you working on, Emily?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a few things. So I've been doing a lot of shorts lately, which is kind of cool. I like the shortened time frame just for now. So I just finished an animated short, and it's kind of this hybrid as well. So worked with a woman, immigrant woman, also from Nicaragua, and she was unhoused for a year with her 3-year-old son. And so it's just an 8-minute short, because here in the Bay Area, I live in Oakland, and this was in San Francisco. You know, we have similar, you know, different and similar, I think, to Waikiki, a major housing crisis here. So she lived that, but it's for children. I always wanted to do a children's story. So it's really intended for like 7 and 8 year olds can watch this, and but like with your family, so it's kind of like family, enjoyment, hopefully. And so it's really about like what it means to have a home, and what does it mean? What does home mean? What is home? And it's kind of inspired from this is like old like anthropology stuff. This is where there's this cool conversations from 1930s. This anthropologist Gregory Bateson, he would publish these conversations he would have with his daughter, his really young daughter, and they're all like about like the language getting all muddled, and like they're having these discussions and everything kind of gets all mixed up, but then they like come to some place or some kind of understanding. And so that's kind of what Maria and her son Emmanuel do in these 8 minutes. And I'm happy with it. Worked with Christina Motwani, who edited, was one of the editors for Fruits of Labor, and a really great animator, Pamela Chavez. So that was a really fun collaboration, but animation takes a while, so it took us a little longer than we had planned. And then yeah, I'm doing just commissioned shorts, so I'm editing in post for something for Independent Lens. It's just like a short about a DA, so it's very different, but it's also a woman's story. And then working on something for The Intercept right now, also about women workers. So I'm kind of on that theme, and I do love it. Like, I think it's like endless for me. There's just like endless questions about women and work. And then, yeah, there's certain things like that have come my way that we'll see what happens with like the South by Southwest. I kind of see myself as really emerging, and then all of a sudden I'm getting a little more attention for me, like relative to myself. So there's just been a lot of different potential projects. And then I have something that I've just been developing with a friend, which is about a woman who we were in conversation with her and recording our conversations while she was in prison. And what I was so drawn by her name, Sol, is that she, through her 16-year sentence, she ended up gardening in the prison. And she was, it was serious, she's open about she'd killed a man. That's what got her in prison. And so, and she sees gardening as this like source of freedom. So it's really like drawn towards like being this really harsh, horrible, violent environment, and yet like, dreaming of being a professional horticulturalist. And even just on these phone conversations while she was in prison, like how her voice would light up just talking about garden design. And now she's been released. And she's becoming a professional horticulturalist. And so it might be probably like a short as well. That's kind of what, and so, yeah, there's things that I'm like dreaming about. But for now, I'm kind of in this mode of like doing a lot of different things that are smaller projects, and then we'll see what develops into maybe a bigger thing. But I am enjoying like the satisfaction of finishing something that can be out in the world a little more quickly.
Short.
Yeah, that kind of feels good, like psychologically it feels good right now. But yeah, what about you, Christopher?
I'm kind of having the same experience where you said you're like, there's bigger projects that people are speaking to you about. I'm attached to a few feature film projects that I'm excited about. We'll see how those things go. Things take a while to get going. But I'm personally working on I have two partners. I'm working on a 360-degree immersive environment projection in a geodesic dome for the Honolulu Museum of Arts with Lanakila and Nicole Naone. And it'll be an art immersive environment. on the Mauna, actually.
Wow.
It's not about the movement, so to say, or the protection of the Mauna, but it's about the Vahipana, or the spiritual aspect, the space of the what are we protecting? Why is it so special and sacred for us? And so that's like it's film, but it's art, but it's a 360 art film project that I'm excited about. That's what I'm currently working on. Besides that, I like I said, I mentioned I write and write, and I wrote a sci-fi episodic
Ooh,
based in a near future sci-fi episodic uh, on climate refugees.
wow.
So that's the long-term personal project that I'm just gonna keep working towards until something happens with that. But that one's exciting for me too.
That sounds really cool.
I'm just reading a comment from the audience. Michelle says, "Thank you for this incredible, eye-opening, and powerful conversation." She also wants to know what I'm working on, but that can come later.
No, Tracy, you
Oh,
should.
Tracy, what are you working on?
Please.
um, well, stuff that I hope to finish one day. About 3 years ago, we shot a 360 immersive story that's about a native jazz singer named Mildred Bailey. She's actually the person who found Bing Crosby. And
Oh.
she is amazing. And so we recreated an old speakeasy in Seattle and it's in the space called Black and Tan. And it's all just like Black, Indigenous, brown faces, and there's dancing and singing, and it's really beautiful. So it's just it needs to be edited. It's one of those projects where it's beautiful, it's shot, there's an assembly cut, but it needs to be edited. And so my mind's just, how there's that place where you're doing the work, you're doing all of this, this stuff, this business stuff that's part of a film, but my mind needs to be free to do that creative work to really bring the film to finish, where I have to like stop kind of the outside world and get into my creative space inside. So there's that. It's
Sounds
pretty
great.
exciting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds really cool.
Let's see. Ray from the audience said, "I think she was the primary artistic influence for Tony Bennett too." She's amazing. Yeah, nobody knows that there's this. She was a grand diva or grandmother of, jazz at that time period in the 30s, and people are unaware of her. So it'll be fun to get that out there someday. And I like a good challenge. I think immersive media is really interesting, to move people through space. I think it's emotionally fascinating to tell a story, but to also move people physically within that story.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? It's like how to utilize technology to enhance storytelling, or to tell a story that be would be beneficial using that technology. So it's fun. It's challenging. It's fun. I don't know how it's going to turn out yet. We'll see.
So as we move towards the end, I'm just seeing another person said, "Thank you for this amazing discussion." What are some, I guess, what's some advice that you have for, people who see themselves in you, for other Kanaka Maoli filmmakers or Colombian American Latinx filmmakers? Because we're finally at the stage where there's enough of us where we see role models, but also people see us as role models. And so I'm curious what advice you might have.
Christopher, you can start.
First of all, I'll never listen to anything I say. And number two, see rule number one. I think I agree with you, Tracy, that it's an exciting time for us as Indigenous filmmakers because there's like a critical mass. So, it's like we're not such a fringe as before. So, like I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for younger filmmakers that didn't exist when I know when I started making film, there wasn't funding for short Indigenous stories like there is now. There was only funding for documentary films. So I'd say take advantage of the fact that people want to hear your stories now. It's like all the studios are having these diversity, initiatives, and that's great. And as the media moves more towards acceptance of authentic voices from within the community, at the same time, there's just a lot of stories to tell. If we just look outside, today, there's people are still getting killed by police officers, and there's still land struggles everywhere. Against there's so many issues that I think our voices are needed, and I think no matter how hard it is for you to see yourself in a position where your viewpoint matters, it's important for you to realize that it does. Like it's your ancestors, Na'amakua or Kupuna, put us in this position. It's like we are a continuation and we are necessary. It's like you wouldn't be in this position if you weren't, and I think you have to realize that that's your kuleana, that's your responsibility as much as it is as an opportunity. It's like you have to utilize your voice, or else you're not living up to your potential that your Aumakua and your Kupuna had envisioned you as. So I think, for Hawaiian filmmakers, we understand that like it's important. Our voices are important. I think for all filmmakers, especially Indigenous filmmakers, please hurry up and make more films so we don't have to wait for I'm still like, come on guys, make another feature film. Somebody's got to have one next year. They want to wait till my next project and I take forever. So I'm like, hey, I'm hoping, with the opportunity, they choose to walk through that doors and say, hey, we're going to make this happen. And I think it just takes them realizing that they can do it. And forget about my first two roles. That's actually it. Just realize it's a responsibility and and a privilege. So take it seriously and hurry up and do it. We're waiting.
Hurry up and do it.
Hurry up and do it.
Oh, Emily, we're down to hear your sage advice too.
Oh, I don't know if I'm sage, but I'll try. I think Christopher said it, like we're necessary, seriously, and we're not replaceable. And I think that's one, it's so hard because there is a lot of rejection in this industry. We've made major strides, but there is still a long way to go. And sometimes you might even get certain responses to your work that is frustrating and sometimes even feels ignorant. And that, just know it's not you. We are in this together. You're not alone. I think it's important to reach out to people. Oh my gosh, Tracy knows, like all these crazy emails I send. EP team, I need your advice, But like, there's so much generosity there, and I hope that I return the generosity. I want to see, whatever, I feel like I had a very circuitous path. So even if you're not like 19 years old and, you know, cinematic genius, right? It's okay. Some of my favorite, you know, I used to teach when actually my favorite in teaching, I love youth. Obviously, I made a youth-centered film, but I used to teach my favorite classes when I taught in the CUNY system were my adult classes. So scheduling for the evening and for the adult classes, I loved it. You know, there's something to say for life experience. So wherever you're at in your life, you do have a story to tell. You know, that said, is, you know, this is a skill, a craft, an art form like any other thing, and it takes time to develop. So I always say, you know, you might make some crap, you know, I don't want to keep using cuss words, so I have a problem here. This is because I hang out with my sister and we just have potty mouths, horrible potty mouths, so they slip. But you know, you're gonna make some not so great stuff, and that's okay, as long as you're kind of aware and can hone your craft and be open to revising and making it better, you know. And I think that's really important, and it's just like, go on your journey however that's going to be. And you know, there's always stories to tell, and I don't know, I feel like it's a human thing. We need stories, and we need them. It makes life meaningful. I don't know how, you know, I even think about even that I couldn't imagine myself as a filmmaker until later in life, or a little later than some folks maybe. But I'm like, oh my God, like my grandmothers, especially my grandma on my maternal side, incredible storytellers. I mean, that's all we did, was my grandma would tell. I write down, actually, that's where I have sort of this writing thing of all these crazy, amazing stories. And talk about like surreal or magical, very magical kind of ways of storytelling and incredible things that are just like, oh my God, you couldn't make this up, you know. So I do have sort of a script of like multi-generational women in Colombia, in this like small town, and they're kind of a mishmash of people. So maybe eventually that'll become something, but I don't know, like incredible storytellers. So like we were saying, our ancestral knowledge, our family knowledges, you know, we know how to tell stories. And I think it's embracing that, and bringing that into our work. And it's true, like Christopher was saying and Tracy's saying, like people want fresh perspectives. Even if sometimes the industry, certain executives might not always see it, that's what people want. People want our story. People want fresh stories. You could see it with like the whole stories around Black Panther and how hard it was, you know, that's like a Hollywood level, but still, you know, whatever. And it's like people ate that up across the globe, you know. Whenever there's something that's actually takes a risk, which is can be hard for people to do sometimes on the industry side. Filmmakers, we take risks a lot, actually. Us indie filmmakers are always taking the risk. But when industry, higher level industry is taking the risk on our voices, they get fresh stories. They get stuff that people are excited about, you know? So I don't know, we need to keep doing our thing. We're all, you know, so many of us, you know, we're organizing. We need each other. And, you know, I just see exciting things in our future. You know, it's like, it is growing. It is growing. So that's exciting.
Thank you. In our last few moments, I just saw that you took your mute off. Christopher, do you have some last thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you to Seattle International Film Festival for programming our films and allowing us the opportunity to speak on this panel and get to know the other filmmakers, and just grateful that we have the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much.
I feel the same way. I'm really grateful. I'm super grateful for Tracy. She's been a champion throughout. It's like very needed. We need champions like Tracy, who is just brilliant and can believe you know, you need to believe in yourself, but like to have that, it's important. And really, really excited to have gotten to know you more, Christopher, and have this opportunity. I just see what you're doing is exciting. I'm going to be like keeping my eye on what's next.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, this is
I'll
just
keep my
cool.
eye out for you. I'm gonna watch for your short films coming out.
Okay, cool.
We're gonna have to leapfrog each other.
I know, exactly.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you both. It's just, one of my purposes in life is to be in service to community, and it's just like drinking water, to hear you laugh, to hear your pain, to hear your stories, to see you doing it. And I just appreciate that courage and that energy and that drive and that creativity. So big ups, much appreciation. And I look forward to seeing you all around. And thank you to our SIFF audience and everyone who has been on this journey with us and in this conversation together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Aloha.